Okay, so we've talked about target segmentation and how that segmentation might happen for toys, the kind of categories of segmentation that might influence us when we market Popco toys. Let's talk now about consumer behavior. Now, consumer behavior often influences purchase decisions. So this category of behavior considerations really happens mostly in the retail environment. So for Popco, because we're not a retailer, we don't mostly sell toys directly to the public. We sell to intermediaries, for example, wholesalers. It doesn't affect us as much, but it's still important to understand because we might want to pay for and support promotional activity with the retailers in cooperation. So, consumer behavior falls into kind of social behaviors, situational, and psychological behaviors. Now let's look at the situational behaviors first. Now you can imagine that when you walk in to purchase a toy in a department store, you're kind of inundated with many different messages. You might be in a different mindset than if you walk straight in a toy store that only sold toys. A department store, the context, we might be willing to spend more on our toy purchase because all of the items there are kind of a higher price point. But if we walk into a toy store, we're more likely to be very price conscious and content conscious because we can see the toy in context next to many, many more toy competitors. Okay? So the situational influences have a lot to do with the purchase decision. Other situational influences, things like the time of day when you go in. If you go into a department store and it's a really slow time of day with your kid, you might be more willing to make a purchase for your child compared that if you went to a department store at a really busy time, your child starts crying and screaming and you just want to get out of there, right? Now, let's think about psychological consumer behavior influences for a second. The psychological influences can have to do with the motivations for someone to purchase a toy. Let's think of this mom. Now, her motivation might be because she feels a little guilty, for example. Maybe she hasn't had much time to spend with her kid and the kid's very sad and misses his mom. So she might rush out to buy a toy to make up for that. That would be a kind of motivation of this person. But also we can think about the personality of the buyer. If we thought that this was a really competitive mom, if we also found out that she was very impulsive and she's likely to make impulse purchases, like in the heat of the shopping moment, we might think about where we put our toys in the toy store. Where we put things for sale might be closer to the register, for example. So, the final aspect of consumer behavior involves social influences. Now, in many countries, the social influence is directly linked to your family and your sense of status of your family, which is particularly strong in Korea. In other countries, the kind of social influence might be around where you live and your particular community. So, how do you think elements like your family, how your family relate to each other and how they get along, and your social class or sense of social class, how do you think those might influence consumer behavior for parents buying toys? Okay, so now that we've got a good idea about target segmentation and consumer behavior, how do we use that information? Well, if you're the marketing person marketing Popco toys, it might cause you to think about where you should sell them. We might choose, for example, to sell more toys through local toy shops if we want to focus on suburban sales. If we're focusing on urban sales, city centers, we might go more with department stores. Right? It also will influence the kind of messages we use. And we'll need to think about the kind of psychographic profile as well as the target behaviors in the situation of purchasing a toy in the retailers we distribute them to. What will trigger that person to consider our toy above others? Do we need to have a message on there about the education value or cooperating with other kids? Or maybe it could just be hours of fun. We need to understand the messages that will trigger someone to purchase our toy. Importantly, we also need to think about price. Now, price is the most strong influencing factor to any consumer purchase decision generally. And certainly price will be a consideration for our toys. Price them too low, people might think they're cheap. Price them too high, people won't think they're value for money. So we need to find the sweet spot on price that will not only encourage that first purchase, but will encourage hopefully multiple purchases for multiple occasions. Maybe it's Children's Day, maybe it's for a birthday party, maybe it's a Christmas gift. We need to identify what kind of messages, what kind of pricing strategies, and when we can make those sales. Now, we were talking about a target universe, and this was a very, very big gross estimate, assuming that we had 50% of a very big percentage. In reality, that number would be much, much smaller. So in reality, in Korea, our prospective toy buyers for our kind of toy might be on the order of 50,000. 50,000 per year. Remember, those are potential customers, not potential toy sales. That's an important distinction, because if those are potential customers, if we can get them to purchase more than one of our toys, multiple toys, or accessories, or other items under our brand, in other words, increase their investment or our share of their toy spending, we can achieve higher revenues. Now, we need to convert these as much as possible to an increase in revenues. How do we do that? Primarily through product development strategies and pricing strategies.